For this series' first video, we inferred from the Bible's account of the creation of human beings that responsibility is a hallmark of true adulting. But there are present trends in our culture that are unfortunately damaging to the very idea of responsibility and thus of adulthood. We already enumerated two of these, namely overprotective parenting and the culture of victimization. If you haven't seen the first part, you can click this link and watch it right now. Let us add two more trends destructive of #adulting. Self-entitlement. The culture of self-entitlement brings nothing good to the state of today's adulthood. Cultural critics are saying that millennials are the most entitled generation. They went out into the world indoctrinated that it is theirs for the taking. This was the sermon they heard from the podium at the day of their graduation. The motto they carry is this: accept me just as I am. Sometimes even reward me just as I am. It is the rest of the society that must accept, even affirm, who I am regardless of, who I am. Most of us enjoyed such unconditional love with our mothers when we were yet infants. It doesn't matter what we look like or how we act out. We cry and we get fed, cuddled, smiled upon with perfect acceptance. We do not have to earn it or give anything in return for it. Of course, that's how nature works. The problem is many have not learned to outgrow that infantilism. They have not truly become adults. You see this in a man who is not capable of having a meaningful relationship with a woman, to truly look after her needs, to change himself for the better, if need be, for his partner's sake, doing the messy emotional work. And yet he still goes around seeking romantic entanglements in the hope that one day he gets to find another mother in a partner who would lavish him with unconditional love with little to no effort on his part. He may call this love, but it is actually an infantile dependency and exploitation. Another example are those who flaunt their uncivil behaviors publicly in the name of authenticity, with social media posts carrying the #YouDoYou. What need is there for change, growth, and maturity if I should be accepted just as I am? Gender confusion. Among the most destructive of adulthood, of course, is the gender confusion of our society. In the Garden of Eden, as you may remember, we have two adults whose roles are defined by their genders. In fact, role reversal between the man and the woman is one angle that explains what happened in the fall of man. The standard by which we evaluate the maturation of a person into adulthood must have variations depending on whether the person is a male or a female. This is not a difference in terms of superiority or inferiority, but of roles. However, what are gender roles in our culture? What is gender even? A woman choosing to prepare herself for a domestic calling is frowned upon by the very feminists who claim to be on their side. A man seeking to improve his leadership skills risks being called a misogynist. This is cruel to boys who needs to learn how to become a man in a society where the state of manhood itself is looked upon as evil and toxic. This is cruel to all children who are politicized and led to confusion at the earliest days of childhood. Who are the heroes of today's society? Those who refuse to embrace their biological gender. This is not a culture that promotes adulthood. So why should we be concerned about adulthood? Well, because society needs adults, true adults, for its well-being. We get farther and farther the garden and closer to the island in the Lord of the Flies, in a culture where adulthood does not flourish. Men and women who are supposed to have been making valuable contributions to their own little spaces in the world at the age of early 20s, even younger, are still expected to be young, wild, and free. These adolescents' concepts of already having full-grown bodies while still possessed with the mind of a boy or a girl is a luxury unknown to previous generations who were more in touch with reality. Such is only possible in a society of material affluence and modern conveniences that allow for prolonged residence inside fantasy worlds of video games, TV shows, and social media. But this ecstasy of fantasy living has a great cost because it is fleeting, leaving those who became addicted to them more depressed than ever and much less productive. Take for example the poison of pornography in our culture. This is partly due to the impotence of our men to pursue meaningful relationship with a woman that leads to responsible marriage. Instead, they resort to these devilish quick fixes for their sexual urges. At worst, their failure to mature into loving, respectful individuals leads to acts of violating women. If maturity of character through adulting is among the prized messages of our culture, one of the goals of education, and a function of parenting, I believe we will see happier, more fulfilled, and productive citizens. But parenting is presently equated with protecting. Education aims at making soulless producers and consumers, and the culture discourages real adulting. The cultivation of virtues, chief of which is love, is the essence of real maturation, the progress from childishness to adulthood. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways, says the Apostle Paul in the greatest passage on love. Of course, the redemptive hope of adulting is found in Him who perfectly embodied in His person what mature human beings are supposed to be. Jesus Christ lived a perfect adult life as He lived a perfect infancy and childhood on behalf of those who could not. He died to pay the penalty for those who fell short of the moral maturity demanded by God's standard. Those who place their trust in Him are assured of a future as perfected, glorified adults in the restored Garden of Eden.